Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to LL3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date is Saturday, June 27th, 2020. Let us begin. Hey folks, hopefully everyone's doing well. It's nice and warm out here in the early Saturday in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, I went in the Hemishi district. It looks like the coordinate forces came out, the building divisions, shutting down places and harassing folks for not keeping their distance. Yes, edict is exceptional. So sometimes if you see these individuals come around harassing your places, bars and restaurants, ask them this one question out of love. Are your buildings up to code? Yeah, you know how that goes. I was like reading some of the stuff that has happening due to the whole COVID-19 spike. Like I said before, my friends, how accurate is the information? And like I said, I told everyone before as well, is that, you know me, I've been pretty consistent, bioweapon and all that. And always talk about your health. And what's fun, I was listening to Ted Deutsch talk about COVID-19. I'm not just ragging up, still using the same edict, rhetorical, parodying rhetoric, about vaccines and all that. It's like, brother, how about nutrition? Okay, so I sent him a little link on nutrition of counting COVID-19. I even said something to Mike Adams about he's pro-mask and pro-freedom. Everything should be voluntary. Not obligatory, because shut places down, may put people in jail. So you know what? I could tell all those people who run these bars and restaurants, you should challenge these bastards. Say, hey, I want a jury trial then. No victim, no crime, right? And people got to start challenging these things, man. And it can be done, all right? Because people have to make a living. People got to pay their bills. Okay, etc. And they was trying to shut these folks down. People not there hoeing around. A lot of us are in good health. We're not sitting there sick as like puppies and anything like that. It's just it's going to be very inconvenient, and I expect everything to backfire. All right, so I got a few things I've looked into and stuff I shared with other folks in the internet world, which is good. So. Something's gonna give. But speaking of interesting things, they passed this bill, H.R. 51, on statehood for DC. Pretty cute here. Washington's Douglas Commonwealth, they want to call it. And there's some controversies about it, unconstitutionalities. But I was going to read something here from the Epoch Times, and it says House Democrats passed bill to make D.C. the 51st state by Jack Phillips, and came out, of course, earlier yesterday. To say here, House Democrats approved bill to admit the District of Columbia as a state on Friday, making the first time the Congressional Chamber has passed a measure to make the city into a state. The measure was introduced by Washington's non-voting House member, Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, a Democrat, and it would limit the federal capital to a small area that encompasses the White House, Capitol, Supreme Court, and other federal buildings. Norton wrote that it marks the first time since the creation of the District of Columbia 219 years ago that either the Chamber of Congress has passed a bill to grant statehood to D.C. residents with the equal citizenship. The remaining part of Washington would become the 51st state, called Washington Douglas Commonwealth. The area would have a population of around 700,000 people, according to the Census Bureau. Imagine if it becomes a state. Probably had the highest violent crime in the rest of the country, right, on the state level. Just imagine that. This is by the Census Bureau here. President Trump and numerous GOP members have said they won't support the measure, with Trump saying that it will guarantee 2 more Democratic senators and at least 1 Democratic member of the House of Representatives. This is more like a little, you can say a little faction cloak and dagger game? Yeah, it is possible. And D.C. will never be a state, Trump told the New York Post. You mean District of Columbia a state? Why? So can we have 2 more Democrat senators and 5 more congressmen? No, thank you. That'll never happen. The White House issued a statement on Wednesday formally opposing Norton's bill. Norton bill. He vowed to veto the measure if it reached his desk. Office Management and Budget, or OBM, said in his own statement that the president would be advised to veto the bill if it clears the Senate. In addition, H.R. 51 will create an opportunity for a new state of Washington to dominate the Capitol and render those who meet there beholden to his own interest rather than the interest of the nation as a whole, the OBM statement said. House Majority Leader Steny H. Hoyer, Democrat from Maryland, told reporters that Democrats are committed to getting it to be law as long as it takes us. We're going to take John Lewis's advice. We're going to keep our eye on the prize, which is statehood for the District of Columbia, he added. Republican lawmakers said that the statehood measure would require a constitutional amendment, which is correct, and I will clarify that. So, it says here, Representative Gregory Murphy, Republican from North Carolina, told the House floor that Congress should give the land back to Maryland instead of making the city of its own state. The move is simply unnecessary when ceding D.C. back to Maryland is a viable, cost-effective, and common-sense option, Murphy said, adding that the District of Columbia requires a constitutional amendment to change. The framers of the Constitution were very clear about this, he added. The Supreme Court reaffirmed this in 1949. It's the first time that Congress has voted on the DC Statehood Initiative since 1993, although the issue has been debated for decades. Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, told Fox News last year that push for statehood is a full-bore socialism on the march in the House, adding, as long as I'm a majority leader of the Senate, none of that stuff is going anywhere. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, in support of the bill, said on the House floor that the statehood for the district is showing respect for our democracy. See, they use these same enslavement terms, okay, democracy. And I hear from both sides. I tell them to shut the hell up. Get the hell out of office if you're going to have that dumbed-down rhetoric, okay? I'm just, just like, good grief. Adding that it's about democracy for the people and for a constitution. What a hypocrite, I'm just... I just get a big kick out of these things. And what's funny about it, because I will add a link on here as well, or just try to make sure you can look it up on congress.gov, see if my computer will work with me on it, on the bill. And it's DC Emission Act, they call it, which was introduced on January 3rd, 2019. And it gives you a whole rundown. The mayor of District of Columbia shall issue a proclamation for the first election to Congress, or 2 senators and 1 representative of the Commonwealth. So it'll be more of a Commonwealth-style thing. And so you can, and of course they want to repeal the 23rd Amendment. Okay, so, which has to be a constitutional thing. Like, 2/3 House majority rule, 2/3 Senate majority rule, and 3/4 of the state within the Union. So just so you can make that clear. So, it's funny about that because it reminds me of something I'm going to talk about. The Fed's trying to do that to West Virginia, so I will add it. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But first, I got this information from Publius Hoodless blog, Understand the Constitution. It says here, Congress has no authority to confer statehood on the District of Columbia. It says here, under Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress has the power to admit new states into the Union. There's a list of it when admitted. A wiki list, of course. Note that new states were colonies or territories, or as with Vermont and Texas, independent republics, before they were admitted into the Union as states. That is highly significant. District of Columbia has an existing constitutional status as the seat of the government of the United States. Okay, so that's Article 1, Section 8, next to last clause of the U.S. Constitution. And I will read that in a moment here. It says, in order to change constitutional status of the District of Columbia from the seat of the government of the United States to a state, Article 1, Section 8, next to the last clause, must be amended pursuant to Article 5 U.S. Constitution. So it'll be maybe a congressional meeting and all that. Any pretended act of Congress which purports to confer statehood on the District of Columbia will be totally and blatantly unconstitutional. Then I had someone on Twitter try to refute it. And I have to say, I had a laugh. I'm sorry. I just did like a rant about it and try to use some historical merit, which was totally inapplicable. It was an invalid argument. So I had to use a emoji, what they were going to call it, of a person laughing about it, okay? Because I take the initiative on looking at these things before making these statements. And it's interesting here about the next to the last clause of the Article 1, Section 8. And as it reads here, this is Clause 17, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 square miles, as by secession of particular states with the acceptance of Congress become the seal of the U.S. government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state, in which same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. And is 18, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or any department of officer thereof. So, respectfully, the whole thing is null and void. And someone tried to refute that. And this, it's like more like sounds like a used car salesman, to be very frank. This is why I start laughing when I just had to laugh. I'm like, good grief. Hey, I take the time to verify. And bottom line is, it's null and void, okay? So the whole DC Statehood is illegal. And I did inform my Congressman, Ted Deutsch, on this matter because he thought it was a great idea. No, sir, it is illegal, unconstitutional. In your defense, or refute it is negated. So, it's just one of those things, friends. You got to always see things in a bigger picture. So it just gets me not mad, but just like they all assume that we're all just a bunch of nincompoops. Yeah. Before I do this, talk about this. The song is introduction is Thunder Arise by Techno Axe. So I just use that as my for the intro of the song. I may use it again. I don't know. I'm just like having fun playing with it. Usually I'm on my phone a lot, but just gonna let's see how it sounds. However, we'll just do something what the feds did during the time of Abraham Lincoln. It was West Virginia, okay, and like it says here, it's from the Mises Institute, Mises.org, under the Mises Wire by David Brenner. Came out November 28th, 2018, so it was almost like a year and a half ago. And this one's entitled, When the Feds Like Secession, the Case of West Virginia. So like history may be repeating itself here, okay? So as it says here, many people know that the state of West Virginia came to be during the Civil War, but very few know that the admission of the Union was particularly controversial. Even in the North, free from the influence from the departed Southern states, many opposed Lincoln's desire to admit West Virginia. Standing against Lincoln's ultimate stance, those who offered candid deference to the Constitution considered Congress enabling act that admitted West Virginia as an unconstitutional usurpation. And I read about this too during The Real Lincoln by Thomas J. DeLorenzo. So you should check that book out. It's very good, okay? And a lot of stuff that I question, and I got a lot of clarification. And plus, what's cool about that book itself, it gives you bibliographies and references and sources. You can go further and learn more about it. So I recommend everyone check out that book out, because many people call him the great emancipator, but in reality, he was the great centralizer. That's from the words of Dr. Walter Williams, a black gentleman from George Mason University. But the whole thing doesn't matter if he's black or not, but very, like I said, very interesting when he made that statement. So as I continue on here, the genesis of West Virginia is a complex story, beginning with Virginia's response to an impending demonstration of force against the South. On April 16, 1861, Lincoln called for 75,000 troops to be raised while Congress was not in session. The new force's sole purpose was to prepare for an invasion of the southern states. For the first time in American history, a president intended to raise an army by himself without congressional approval. Yeah, a one-man army, right? Additionally, he aimed to direct the forces to invade American states and use force against any opposition that stood in his way. In response, an assembly comprised of delegates representative of all Virginia's counties organized a convention to consider secession. This was hardly rushed to judgment. In just 2 weeks earlier, a prior convention in the state consciously voted against the ordinance of the secession, hoping for a compromise to be adopted. Several settlement plans had been proposed in Congress, and war was not a foregone conclusion at that point. Despite the urging of the states in the Deep South that had already seceded, Virginia embraced a candid course for resolution before May. So, Lincoln's unilateral call for forces was considered an incredible hostile action in the South, especially in the states that, up until that point, had given Lincoln the benefit of the doubt. Virginia, being one of these states, was faced with heightened apprehension toward the blatant threat of force. Moreover, Virginia's delegates realized that Lincoln's army would have to march directly to the heart of the state to confront South Carolina and other seceded states. State conventions selected by Republican elections ultimately voted to depart the Union on April 17th. Despite this decision, some delegates from several counties of Virginia refused to recognize their state's position on secession. These delegates reorganized with the intention for advocating for secession from Virginia to create a pro-Union Virginian government. Accordingly, they called for a convention to meet in Wheeling to discuss the matter. Their initial convention culminated with a decision to wait until Virginia had approved its secession referendum before pursuing any additional course of action. Sentiments in Virginia were highly supportive of leaving the Union, and the state's referendum passed overwhelmingly by a vote of 132,201 for to 37,451 against. The patience of Virginia citizens has run its course, and the people would not tolerate threat of force against the Commonwealth. In response to the referendum, a second Wheeling convention met, this time claiming that all Virginia's state offices were vacant and that the delegates would act as a legitimate government of Virginia. Meanwhile, before West Virginia was admitted to the Union, Lincoln made official statements recognizing the new West Virginian government. Additionally, he promptly allowed the state to send two senators to represent in the United States Senate alongside two representatives who took their own seats again in the House of Representatives. This raised further controversy in the United States Senate, with the objections of James A. Bayard of Delaware were overridden, and the body voted to seat the new senators. So it's like Congress passed an enabling act in July of 1864, which would admit West Virginia to the Union conditionally. It required implementation of a gradual emancipation plan according to Lincoln's independent pensions. This attempt to admit West Virginia became so controversial that even Lincoln's old cabinet of hand-picked advisors could not agree on its constitutionality. In consideration of this debate, Secretary of State William Seward and Attorney General Edward Bates drafted letters to Lincoln expressing their opinion on the matter. Seward maintained that West Virginia's incorporation was constitutional on the basis that Virginia engaged in treason against the Union, which is totally illegal anyway. But I'm going to continue on here. The organized political body which has committed this treason have broken and trampled under its feet the Constitution, and even the Union of the United States is still standing at a treasonable attitude within the jurisdiction of the state of Virginia, but has been dislodged from the portion of that jurisdiction which contained within the new state of West Virginia. And just to let you folks know, they were like maybe the last of the 4 states from that region to secede to incorporate with the Confederate States of America. Because if you read the Declaration of Independence, when the government comes usurp, just paraphrasing, you have to overthrow or start a new form of government. And that's what they did. So it was a contract, voluntary contract, because they were considered independent states, sovereign states. So it wasn't treasonous at all, to be very frank. So I have to disagree what Seward has to say about that. And of course, the Constitution maintains a very different definition of treason than what Seward articulated. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, give them aid and comfort. Under this definition, under the assumption that the secession of southern states was unconstitutional, the North's actions fits the Constitution's definition of treason closer than the actions of the southern states. Despite Lincoln's and Seward's claim that secession was illegitimate and treasonous, they both professed that there was no longer a legitimate government in Virginia. Go figure. Lincoln was a lawyer. Okay, so I'm going to continue on here. In doing so, they made a claim that only a separatist government stance on the matter should be accepted for the purpose of statehood. In Seward's mind, the act of secession precluded the state from maintaining its own political boundaries and government. This train of logic is utterly confounding. If secession wasn't an authentic action, how could the federal government constitutionally ignores Richmond's stance on the issue? Similarly, if Virginia's government in Richmond became illegitimate the moment it seceded, wouldn't all the American states be classified similarly, since they have absolved themselves from all ties to the British Crown? Neither Lincoln nor Seward could maintain a rational, coherent narrative regarding these questions. Lincoln had many detractors against his plan to admit West Virginia, but none were as convincing as his own Attorney General Edward Bates. Bates, a prominent Whig who also revered Henry Clay, refused to rubber stamp the plan. Hardly a Lincoln critic, Bates played a prominent role in the arrest of Southern sympathizers in the North and sought the conviction for sedition. Even Bates, considered by some to be the lackey of Lincoln, realized the unconstitutionality of the plan. So yeah, at least he had a conscience, for goodness sakes. Expressing his criticisms of the plan in an official letter, Bates concluded that any reading of the Constitution did not allow for the federal government to create a state. I observe, in the first place, that Congress can admit new states into this union, but cannot form states. Congress has no creative power in that respect and cannot admit into this union any territory, district, or other political entity less than a state. And such state must exist as a separate independent body politic before it can be admitted. And the result, i.e., the making of the state by Congress, would falsify the universal fundamental principle of this country that a free American state can be made only by the people, its component members. Congress has no power to make a state. Okay, so when I looked at before, when I showed you before, has power to admit new states in the Union, but can't create, make a state or create. They have the power to approve it, but not create. So there you go. There is a difference. So just to let you folks know on that. And so I'm going to continue on here. That Bates asserted that federal government had no role in making in the state, But this was exactly what Lincoln intended to do with West Virginia. Not only did his proclamation imply but it dictated to the state prerequisite for statehood. It was to implement a gradual emancipation plan according to Lincoln's independent wishes. This was an alien concept. The Constitution provides no power to the federal government to dictate the terms of statehood. The state is first sovereign under its own will, whereupon afterward can petition for statehood. The federal government can choose not to admit a state to the Union, but it cannot dictate in terms of statehood. A previous federal attempt to implement permanent mandates that would last beyond statehood to territories, the Missouri Compromise, was incredibly controversial on the same constitutional grounds. This was because of perception it would create a new subordinate group of second-class states without the power to form their own policies regarding slavery. Thomas Jefferson's reaction to this act was to deem it as a fire bell in the night, which could signal the knell of the Union. For similar reasons, it is doubtful that this reaction to this incident would be much different. In the past, states first created and ratified their own republican constitutions on the basis of their own sovereign specifications. This was done as a precursor to entering the federal union, and the federal government never before questioned the legitimacy of this practice. In Tennessee's case, the state had written and ratified its own constitution, which came into effect concurrent with the state's admission into the union. In Vermont, the state was for a time an independent republic, which its own constitution prior to its admission to the United States in 1791. Prior to its admission, Texas maintained itself as an independent republic for about a decade with its own system of laws and its own constitution. Every case, the ratification of a Republican Constitution and the existence of a Republican legislator predated admission into the federal union. Okay? I'm not saying Republican Party, Republican form of government. Noticeably, Bates remarked that the federal government lacked the power to create a state was corroborated by history. Departing from Lincoln and Seward, Bates also made the observation that the Constitution used plural language to specify that multiple legislators would need to specify consent from a new state from its territory. It speak in the plural of the legislators of the state concerned, i.e. Virginia and West Virginia. Here the proposition is to make two states out of one. Each one, of course, must have a legislator, and the Constitution requires the consent of both legislators before the thing can be done. Now it is said that the legislator of Virginia, old Virginia, has consented. But it is not pretended that the legislator of West Virginia has consented, nor that there is, in fact, any such legislator to give consent. Okay, so it is not there at all. As Bates noted, West Virginia did not have its own legislator to consent to the legislator of Virginia. Furthermore, the Union has considered Virginia's current government in Richmond to be an illegitimate one and did not seek to ascertain their stance on this matter. Instead, Lincoln and Seward sought to undermine the old Virginia by claiming the West Virginia government was the only republic government within the state. Through the entirety of his presidency, Lincoln had maintained an unmistakable stance that the Act of Secession was illegitimate and unconstitutional. If this was the case, Virginia would have remained in the Union and remain invested with its own sovereign powers, including those granting the inception of a new state within this border. Yeah, you're hearing the boat going by, playing some music. So they're having fun here along the New River. Since Lincoln would negotiate with the Confederate States because he believed it would acknowledge their legitimacy, he eschewed any chance for peaceful reconciliation and ignored the Virginian government completely. West Virginia eventually acquiesced to Lincoln's mandate for statehood, implementing the gradual emancipation plan to a new constitution that was ratified on March 26, 1863. For the first time, a new breed of subordinate state without the powers of the original states was formed. Unlike the process through the original Union was created through a compact among states, in the case of the federal government, dictates its own ideas as an ultimatum. And Jefferson's fears had come to fruition. Okay, by adopting the position that West Virginia was free to join the Union under its own will without express sanction of Virginia, Lincoln had unwillingly embraced the principle he was willing to plunge the country into war over secession. Only though the notion that secession was just could Lincoln justify his position. Through this incident, Lincoln demonstrated that he was willing to accept secession when it benefited him, only decrying the principle when it hindered his chief political claim, the permanent solidification of national authority. Because the fact is this, okay, when the Constitution was enacted, to have a constitutional republic, the states create the federal government, not vice versa. Okay, right there, Abraham Lincoln, according to his article, was a great centralizer, a unilateral federal interventionist. And this is why we see in West Virginia, it's happening right now with DC. Pretty interesting. Maybe a little bit different, but the whole thing is, it is illegal. So, some people try, when someone had the audacity, like I said, had the audacity to tweet me on the defense, it was like a whole rant of negated rhetoric. I'm sorry. It's null and void. That's how I look at it. And this whole DC thing is invalid. Because remember, the Rock Republicans back then, with West Virginia, the insane Democrats. Same thing, same crap, different package, right? Always study your history, folks. It's like that whole Trump impeachment. I told people it was illegal. It was Andrew Johnson revisited. They can say whatever they want, but they can't back it up. Why? They're lawyers, so what? They suck at it. And you know what? That is it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, if you see something that's interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence with Decorum. I'm trying to make sure I can put the footnotes on my Spreaker page. And I'll hopefully my computers will work with me on that. In addition, you could, if you want to do a donation, you can hit me at paypal.me/LuckyLuck3. There's other sites I address. Support them also. They do have donation drives. Give them some love as well. All right. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.